In the world of literary scholarship, we're always focused on the other guy. We place our opinions, our thoughts, our most cutting critiques onto the works of other writers and work under an established discourse of criticism and praise. But we very seldom dare to dabble in creation. Many of us feel that it isn't our job, that creation is for the artists, the poets, and the writers, and we exist only to analyze. There's this notion that to attempt to become the artist is blasphemous, or somehow debasing of one's intellectualism. Many scholars that do create keep their academic and creative careers separate, or downplay their whimsical pursuits amongst colleagues. I think this is misguided. In engaging in the creative, we awaken an empathetic part of our minds, a part more attuned to wonder and originality. As literary critics, as cultural caretakers, it's an incredibly helpful exercise to engage in creation. It illuminates a part of our field that we aren't always in sync with, its origin. It's easy to criticize something from 50 feet away. It remains opaque, foreign. It's much harder to dismiss something when you know how much effort went into it, to have attempted the same forms or methods yourself. Working creatively is not just an exercise in becoming a better scholar. It's an exercise in becoming a better human. Today we're mixing things up on the Relevate podcast, and instead of focusing on a scholar's attempt to analyze another person's work, we're going right to the source. Autumn Kep and Brooke Burris are alumni of UNCW. Autumn graduated last spring with her MA in English, and Brooke finished the year before with a BA in business. Together, they have co-authored a collection of poetry titled In a Field of Flowers, which came out earlier this year. Their journey through creation, collaboration, and publication is one that I think that we all could learn something from, and their ability to transcend the hierarchy of artist, scholar, and student is nothing short of courageous. Today we're going to dive into the creative process, the tumultuous world of traditional publishing, and the benefits of self-publishing, and where on earth these two found the time to write a book while in college. From Audacious Media and the University of North Carolina, Wilmington, you're listening to the Relevate podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Charles Wright. Let's begin, shall we? Autumn, Brooke, thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you for having us. We're super excited to be here.
I was wondering, would you mind introducing yourselves the way that you do in the collection by reading your introductory poems?
Oh my gosh. Yes. So this is called My Name is Brooke, after Maria Geisbright. I am dancing in the rain and wrestling in the kitchen. I am a picnic spread, messy yet still beautiful. I am the jelly you lick from your fingers, peach. I'm the honey and cinnamon in your coffee, stirred with a tiny spoon, 3 times to the left, and cartwheels on the beach. I'm the marshmallow you squish between your thumb and index finger, and the giggles lost in your silk bed sheet. I'm the library at your grandparents' house with the ladder that slides, and the wine-stained book of poems that you could never reach. I'm everyone's to know, and yet no one's to keep.
And this is My Name is Autumn, also after Maria Geisbricht. Like the season, I tell baristas who always leave off the N. I am the faded pages of a used book, cracked along the spine, annotated with black ink, dog-eared corners. I am too pretty to be nice. I am the thumb brushing against the back of your hand, the love letter sealed with a kiss, sticky gloss, and mint chapstick. Tulips beginning to wilt in the vase, maybe not quite past my prime, but close. Make a wish, leave a penny in the swimming pool. I am warm chai, drunk on the back patio, and pink fragility in a transparent harbor.
Thank you.
I love that. I love, when I was reading through the book, I love that that's how you guys chose to introduce yourselves. And I wish that people introduce themselves like that more in real life, because I think that it's so much more interesting and such a more intimate look into who you are truly as people, who your souls are, than if you were to just say, hi, I'm Autumn, I'm an English major, and this is what I do for a living. Or, you know, because that's so boring. I feel like I know you so much better from that than if you were to just tell me something surface level. So I love that you opened up the collection that way.
Thank you so much.
I was wondering if you could tell us how you guys started to work together creatively.
So we had really met through a mutual friend of ours. So shout out to Annika. She's also our personal photographer.
Nice.
Yeah, we just really love her. And we had noticed really quickly that we have a lot of common hobbies with each other, just that other people don't do, mostly because they're time consuming. crafts and stuff. So we had really started by working on bullet journaling together because we both like to draw and like do stuff like that. And also it was like the primary way that we were planning our lives while we were in college. So we would meet up once a week to work on our bullet journals. And that was how it started.
We would meet up every Tuesday between classes at the Dunkin' on campus. If it was nice, we would sit outside and just like draw in our little bullet journals. It was just kind of a standing date. So we always had that as time set aside for each other. And after a while of bullet journaling, we ended up finding like a poetry contest on Instagram, which is where we were both first published, was in Campfire Confessions. So we had started writing for these prompts to be like possibilities to be published in this collection. And that was kind of how we started doing the poetry part of it.
That's super cool. So you started writing poetry together sort of for fun, sort of for a competition, but then eventually you had enough material to put a book together. How did that idea come to be?
So along this process, we're like writing all these poems together to be able to try to submit things to this one competition. And, you know, eventually there were some favorites in there that we did submit to the competition, and we did both get put into that book, which was exciting. But then we had all of these other things that we had written with some of those prompts, and then otherwise, like, that we were noodling through as we're working on that competition. We were like, we have so much here. Like, we feel like it's almost going to waste. We should do something with it. So at that time, you know, one of the poets that had really inspired us a lot was Maria Geisbrecht, because she was the one that started Campfire Confessions and everything. And she had just put out a book, and we were like, what if we just did that? Like, we have so many of these poems. Like, there should be a way that we could just be able to put all of this work that we've been working on together into something that we can have and hold. So that was how we really got that idea.
Yeah, that's very cool. It's also just what a wonderful memento from your journey through college of writing all these poems together. Yes. It's really wonderful to have a physical manifestation of that process.
Be
able
to just hold it and know that everything in here came from us, and like we put in all of the work to make it and do it. It's just awesome.
Yes. I find your project to be very ambitious, and it's something that a lot of students probably wouldn't consider for themselves, the idea of putting out a book while you're in college. So I guess, where did you find the time and the confidence to work on a book and publish it all while working on your studies?
So I think the time kind of came easier because it started really as just, it was us hanging out together. Like, that was how we would spend our time. We would, you know, sit at the Dunkin' or in each other's bedroom and just like write or craft or bullet journal or whatever it was. So, and that was like how we fulfilled our time together. So it was just easy because it never felt like work to have to set aside time to just see Brooke and hang out with her.
It did become just more of an excuse to be able to see each other and hang out. So
I love that. Because that, like, the art doesn't feel forced. It's almost like it was just the byproduct of another beautiful thing. You're just like, well, we were just hanging out and having fun and being creative at the same time. And then, oh, look, we have enough material here to put out a book. Like, that's awesome. Instead of getting together with like a business agenda, being like, all right, so we're both two poets. We're going to get together, and by the end of this month, we're going to have a book done.
I can't imagine us sitting down and having a conversation like that ever. We're so unserious.
No, we're not. Yeah, we could not.
But yeah, the confidence is still a question.
We were just talking about this. We had gotten coffee together before this, you know, classic Tuesday poet stuff. But we were just talking about, and I was like, do you think that we ever got the confidence to publish a book? We were kind of going back and forth about that idea, because I think we both had this experience after the book came out where we were like, oh my gosh, people are actually reading it. Like, it wasn't just like our little baby that we're holding now. Because, you know, she had seen people in class that had it, like you. And my mom's like giving it out to everyone she knows. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like, people are actually reading that. So I don't know if it was ever like we gained the confidence. I think we were just like, this would be cool to do. And then we were like, oh crap, people are actually reading that.
And, you know, it was like imposter syndrome is very real. And to maybe like sometimes feel like we're not on the same level as other poets, but it's like we're college students. Like, I think we've kind of just, like, looking back at this now, like, it came out in January, and we've been writing so much since then for other competitions. And to see how much our writing has evolved since doing this, it's kind of an awesome way to track growth too. Yeah. And so even if I'm not always confident in being like, hey, I wrote this book, you should read it, I'm like, this is my starting point. Like, this was origin story object.
Yeah.
And
like even more than that, it's just like a scrapbook of all the time that we've spent together too at this point, because like we said, we were just hanging out and this is what came out of it. So
yeah. As far as imposter syndrome goes, because I think this when I write scholarly stuff, I think this when I write my own personal writing. Everyone who's ever put out a book or published a paper is like, they're just a person that wrote their thoughts down. Mm-hmm. And there's no difference. There's no difference between me being a person who wrote my thoughts down and you being a person who wrote their thoughts down. It's like, we're all just people writing our thoughts down. That helps me with the whole imposter syndrome thing. It's just like, I'll never be good enough. Like, I'm not a good enough writer to put out a book. It's like, well, that other person was also just a person who probably didn't think they were good enough to put out a book, and that book was awesome.
Yeah. I feel definitely the same way, or especially as someone that didn't have any formal education in like writing or English or anything like that. I get a lot of, other people are writing because they've learned how to write a good way, and I'm just writing stuff like, why is my stuff good? Is it good? But I listened recently to a podcast by the Poetry Lab, is that what it's called? The Poetry Lab?
So, yes.
And it was on imposter syndrome, and they had said something about how you only have to know 10% more than your audience. And so I feel like that's so validating, not only because I'm a teacher and I don't know what I'm doing half the time, and I'm like, well, I definitely know 10% more than you nerds. But with the book, I mean, we're telling stories from our lives. Like, we know 100% more than anybody else about that. Mm-hmm. So really any kind of creative writing, especially the kind that we do, I think it's hard to have anybody judge if it's good or bad, because it's like, well, that's my life. Sorry.
Yeah. I love the way that you break the book up into the 4 sections. Can you explain the 4 sections of the collection for the listeners? And then can you say why you chose to break them up in this manner?
So as we had just finished writing all these poems for this competition and like decided we were going to do a book, we were like, literally, how do we sort through them? And we ended up just kind of feeling like we had a lot of poems about being angry at men. And so we were calling that section Hate Men for a really long time. And we had like love men, hate men, myself, friends and family. And so we were like, we can't just like write that in a book. I mean, we could, because it's ours and we get to do what we want, but it wasn't really like
the vibe that we were going for now. So at this point, we have these 4 chunks that are tentatively named Love Men, Hate Men, whatever. And we had been calling them that for a really long time. Like, I think that's kind of singed into our brains. Like, I definitely remember Hate Men more than I remember, what is it even called? Yarrow. But
it's Tansy.
Tansy. Oh, Yarrow's the love one. See, this is what I mean. It took us a really long time. So I guess like one day I think I was scrolling on Instagram and I saw something about like different meanings of flowers, and I was like, oh, it'd be really cool if we were able to like have something that represents that feeling that we're portraying with all of those poems without outright saying it, or something, that symbolizes those kind of things. And we wanted to go for something a lot more gentle and feminine, so the flower thing really worked. And then we did some research on different flowers and the like historical meanings behind them and stuff. So that's how we got to that point of being able to name the sections real names.
Yeah, I love that. So you decided to self-publish this book as opposed to seeking out a more traditional publishing route. What influenced you guys, or what led you to make that decision?
When we had found the Campfire Confessions contest and the poet who was curating everything, Maria, we had found out that she had just self-published her own book. And so we were like obsessed with her. Like, she love her writing so much. And we reached out to her and we were like, hey, do you think that you could kind of give us the rundown on how this works? And we ended up having a Zoom call with her. That was kind of how we started to learn about how to pursue self-publishing.
Yeah, so she had talked a little bit about what would be required for traditional publishing, and then as well as talking about the process of self-publishing, because that is the route that she took. So she did have a lot of experience kind of with that and how it worked. And just through talking to her about some of the pros and cons of traditional publishing, we pretty quickly decided that that wasn't something we wanted to do, just knowing how long it can take, or finding agents and things like that. And it didn't really align with what our goal for this was, which was just to be able to share what we'd been working on. And we really liked that we would be able to just fully put our names on this and have it be the only name on it at all. Like, we know that everything that went into this was our decision, and it wasn't, oh, this would be better for marketing, or this would be received better by this group of people. Like, it was just, this is what we have. So that was, I think, really what led us to make that choice.
Yeah. I mean, even like down to the cover, like we drew the cover art ourselves, like because we wanted to have, this is like our baby. We did everything to put the work into it.
Brooke, I wanted to ask you a question specifically. You are a unique guest to the Relevate podcast because you are, so far, the only non-English major that has ever been on our show. You graduated from UNCW with a business degree last year, and I was wondering if you could speak to the importance of the humanities in your own life and just being creative in general.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first, I feel honored to get to be so special and be the first business person on this podcast. I guess what I would say about, the arts and their importance in my life and just in the world, as a teacher, I can really see the importance of creative outlets on young people specifically, like the students that have some sort of creative outlet. I have one that's like in a band and he's like making music, just released a single, and that's like so cool to see. But those kind of things, those students are like much more well-rounded, better communicators. They just overall, you can tell that they just have a zest for life, and it really is fighting that apathy that we see with so many young people right now of just like, what's even the point? We're all going to pay taxes and die. Like that. And I mean, while that might be true, there's also so much more to do when you have something, creative like that, or when you're able to appreciate other people's creative efforts and stuff like that. So I think super important for all people. And then with myself, I mean, when I graduated, I immediately went into industry, and I was actually working at a marketing agency full time. And I felt like the reason why I was pursuing marketing for my college career was because it wasn't just numbers. Like a lot of business is so numbers driven. It was a combination of that and being able to be like, well, I'm smart and I can do numbers. And also I'm creative, and here's the digital design part of things and content creation and all those things that go into marketing as well. But I didn't feel like in industry you really get any of that. I feel like they kind of strip all of the fun parts out of it, and then you're sitting at a desk doing the same thing every day, as much as it hurts to say that. And that's kind of what led me to continue pursuing creative things in my free time, especially, but also eventually making that career switch as well, just so I could inspire that creativity in young people too. So we can hopefully inspire more of the arts and creativity in future generations going forward, and maybe we can change some of that business climate of streamlining everything to being boring.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's interesting. I have a number of friends who went through college and they were creatively minded individuals, but they wanted to make money. So they didn't go to art school. They didn't get English degrees. They went for business and marketing, because the idea there is that, okay, you get to make money, but be creative. And then almost every single one of them has found the marketing industry to be unbelievably soul crushing. They're like, yeah, this isn't what we hoped it would be at all.
Yes.
I was like, I'm so sorry.
That is so incredibly true. And one of our other online poet friends, he actually is a marketing professional too. Him and I are able to relate on that sort of thing, where it's like they do kind of take everything fun out of like why we went to school to do it, which is unfortunate to say, but.
Yep.
Shout out to Nick Ola. He's awesome.
Yes, he is great.
Great poet.
And he really, I feel like,
friends.
does take some of the dreariness out of like city life and like having a corporate job, because he's pretty public about the fact that, he does live like in Chicago and he's living that corporate life. But also I feel like so many things that he writes about show the beauty of that kind of city. And I think I would totally ignore it if I was living there.
Yeah, I feel like he captures things so beautifully, and it's definitely an inspiration for sure.
I'm sure it's very therapeutic to be in, at least 'cause I found this in my own personal life, like being able to write creatively if you are in a spot where you are not enjoying your life very much, even if it is purely a form of escapism, which is often what I would do, it is very helpful. It's very helpful to be able to engage in creativity and whimsy when your day-to-day life is miserable.
We always say we're gonna like just run away and be like woodland fairies or something. So
just like write poetry and like bake bread and
forage.
Collect berries.
I feel that intensely. Autumn, I was wondering, how has your experience in creating poetry for publication changed the way that you approach your own literary scholarship?
Honestly, I feel like a part of what I enjoy so much about writing poetry is that I feel like it's very personal to me, and maybe I'm able to, share an experience that other people can relate to. And I feel like when I didn't even realize it was happening until I had someone point it out to me. It was Dr. Porco saying like, you're like adding some of your like own personal narrative to these pieces. And I was like, I didn't even realize that was coming through. But I think especially with the rise of AI, I feel like it's in the humanities. A lot of people feel threatened with their degrees and positions because it's like, oh, this computer's going to put me out of a job. But having those kinds of like, I think personal touches, that's what makes literature so special. And as great as AI is and as helpful as it can be, like, it's not human at the end of the day. And I think that that's, I like being able to put my own spin on things. And even Ann Lee had told me she had revised my thesis for me, and she was like, your style of writing, I feel like I can tell that you're a poet even if I didn't know that before. And I was like, that's so funny. Like, I wouldn't have expected anybody to ever say that, but it feels so special.
Yeah, that's cool. I agree. I feel like in the English department, creative writing is an elective that you can do. It's not, if I were in charge of the English department, I would have 2 semesters of creative writing be mandatory for English majors, because I think that being able to creatively write, it just makes you a better writer, like just across the board, engaging with different forms of writing, whether it's making somebody write poetry, making somebody write a first person narrative, whatever, what have you, flash fiction. When you then approach writing a scholarly paper, you have a better style. It makes you a better writer. I think that it's crazy that, like, this will be controversial for people in the department to hear, but the split between the English department and the creative writing department, whenever that happened 10 years ago, I think is a tremendous mistake.
I completely agree. I've taken a couple of creative writing classes at UNCW, and I remember them being some of the most fun classes that I took because, it kind of like showed me that I do have stories inside of me, even if I'm an average college girl. Like, I like Taylor Swift. I like to go, like, sit at a coffee shop for hours. Like, I don't really necessarily feel like I'm all that. But, like, to have someone give me a prompt and be like, okay, 10 minutes, write about it. And then I, like, I'm like, oh, I did have this story to tell, whether it's about me or whether it's something I made up. And then, I think it's English with scholarly papers and literature. It's like you had said in the beginning of the podcast, it's, like, easy sometimes to critique or think about the other person without thinking, like, how can I do this? Where would I fit into this? And so I feel like to be not just a critic, but a writer too, gives you a different perspective.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I completely agree. Your friendship and this creative project is a really nice metaphor for the larger relationship between creativity, English, and business. How did your different academic perspectives play off of each other during the process of writing and publishing this collection?
It really happened really naturally between the two of us, like splitting up kind of the different work that there was to be done. A lot of the things that people kind of outsource when they're publishing a book is like the editing, right? Or like the actual doing the publishing thing. So between the two of us with our own backgrounds and experience, Autumn was really able to tackle a lot of the editing and making sure everything looked okay and, having that good eye for detail in terms of like punctuation and just like the nitty-gritty of that stuff. And then for me to be able to take on a lot of the working in KDP and getting all the publication stuff done, and then kind of working on promotion and promoting ourselves as well together. I think I had a lot of good background in social media marketing in terms of just like getting our Instagram up and running. And we actually just got like above 150 followers, which doesn't sound like a lot, but we feel awesome. Like it's been really special. So I feel like I had a lot of background context on like, okay, what's the best time to post on Instagram in a day? Or not that we always follow that, or how many hashtags is enough hashtags? Which hashtags are the hashtags to use? Like that kind of stuff. I feel like I had a lot of good background on that to help us kind of get our feet on the ground with having people there to read our work. So I think it was just super natural the way that things flowed with like things I know about business and things Autumn knows about English, and then just us also being, lifelong learners and being able to like, let me teach you how to do this thing that's really cool that I learned in school.
And I think there's also sometimes like a tension between business and STEM and then the humanities.
They love to pit us against each other.
For why? Like, that has never been something that was like a point of difference between us ever. And so, it's like you said with the metaphor, like we're best friends. Like it doesn't really matter where we came from, but like look at this great thing that we were able to like do together because of our background. Like it's awesome.
So I come to this conversation with a good deal of experience on the opposing side of the publishing spectrum. I've written 2 books in the last couple of years, and I have been pursuing a traditional publisher since I finished my first one in 2021. It is a maddening process to try to get anybody in the industry to notice you. And for those unfamiliar with the process, this is pretty much the norm. If you don't already have a connection in the publishing industry, it is unbelievably difficult to attract the attention of a literary agent. And it's not uncommon for a starting author to wait 10 years or longer for their first book deal. I'm sure this wasn't a problem for you, and I was wondering, how long did it take you from start to finish to publish your book online?
Gosh, like a year and a half. Like, and that was like including all of the writing and everything. Like, I think we actually did all of the KDP work in like one afternoon or something. Yeah.
We started writing it in November of 2022, and we finished by January of 24 is when it came out. So yeah, about a year.
Yeah, but that includes the writing process. When I'm talking about it's taking me 3 years and I have made no progress whatsoever in getting a book deal, that's from when I finished the book.
Yeah.
Like I spent a year and a half writing the book. Yeah, I started the book in 2020, I finished it in 2021, and then I started trying to get a publisher, and here we are in 2024, and I still have not made basically any progress. So it's interesting. So when did you finish the book? Like, when do you think it was? It was at a point where you were like, we could publish this.
It was before Christmas.
It was before Christmas.
Yeah.
Well, but we had done a lot of work in the time after that. Okay, so yes, it was before Christmas of 2023.
So it basically only took you like 2 months.
Well,
the actual publishing
that to
part.
say, it really took like 2 days, because part of the waiting was just finding enough time, like in the holidays and everything, to be able to see each other and sit down and do it. But when we sat down and did it, we did most of it in an afternoon, and then I finished up the rest once we had finalized the cover art.
But yeah,
it was a really fast process.
We just like were
zero headaches.
Yeah, we were in Brooke's apartment, and it was like, click, your book is gonna be available
on this date. Yeah,
it was just that easy.
That's amazing. For the sake of comparison, I think that it might be helpful for our listener to hear the traditional publishing path. All right, the first thing that you have to do is finish your project. Only nonfiction books are funded before they're written, and these days, even those publishers are starting to want a lot more sample work before they make their decision. That query process is also pretty different, and I'm going to be talking about fiction because that's what I know. This would be the process for anybody who's trying to get a novel or a book of poetry like what you've written here published. All right, once you've finished your project, you have it refined to the best that it could possibly be. Then you need to get all of your supporting documents prepared. You're going to need, number one, a query letter. This is a one-page introduction of yourself and your project. It's the first thing that an agent is going to read when you send them your query. And it has to be incredibly well written. And it needs to make the agent want more within the very first line. The query letter is arguably more important than the manuscript in most cases because it is the thing that will make your queried agent want to start working with you. The second thing you're going to need is a synopsis of your book. And this is actually a 2-for-1 item because different agencies will want different versions of your synopsis. Some will want a very short summary, usually only 1 to 2 paragraphs long, and others will want a very detailed summary, which is about 7 pages in length. And you're going to want to write both. The third thing you're going to need is a clipped sample of your book. Every agent is different, and not everyone will ask for the same query documents. The standard query will include typically the first 10 to 15 pages of your book, but some agents will ask for up to the first 3 chapters. Now that you have your query package ready, you can actually start querying agents. This is how the process works. You can't just approach a publisher on your own. You have to have a project represented by a licensed literary agent. Now, it's important to note here that a literary agent works a lot like how a real estate agent works. You don't give them any of your own money to work for you. Actually, if a book agent ever asks you to give them money, run away immediately because you are about to get caught in a scam. A literary agent makes all of their revenue by getting a cut of the book sales. To find literary agents, there are a number of places that you can look. There are websites like manuscriptwishlist.com or querytracker.com that have large databases of agents and the kind of books that they represent and how they prefer that you send them your query. Or you can look in the acknowledgments portions of some of your favorite books. Most authors will give a shout out to their agent, and you can see who is representing authors who write similar stuff to the projects that you have created. So, for instance, the book that I'm trying to publish is a fantasy book. So I had read A Court of Thorn and Roses and loved it, and so I looked up Sarah J. Maas's agent and I queried her. I didn't hear anything back, but it was worth a shot. After you send out a bunch of queries, you just sit around and wait. It's always smart to send out large batches of queries at the same time. It's called the shotgun method. I sometimes will query up to 15 agents at once and then just wait for rejections because most of them are not even going to respond to your email at all. This is just the reality of the market. Agents receive thousands of queries every time they open up their inboxes, and it just isn't physically possible to respond in a single query. It's lame, and it's very frustrating as a querying author, but I do feel sympathetic to the agents. For example, there was a literary agent that I follow on Twitter, and he opened up his query box, and he tweeted out, "Hey, I'm looking for new authors. I just opened up my query box." And so I just happened to see it in time, and he just tweeted about it. So I quickly ran to my computer and I queried him on his query portal. And then I went back to my day. And an hour later, I saw that he had tweeted, within 1 hour of opening his query box, he had 700 queries sitting in his query box. He never responded to me. And honestly, I don't blame him. I couldn't respond to 700 queries either. If you're lucky and one of the agents that you query is interested in your project, they'll probably ask for a partial or a full version of your manuscript. If they like that, they'll bring you on as a client. From there, you'll be partnered with an editor, and the three of you will work together to make your manuscript as perfect and as shiny as humanly possible. Once your book is ready, your agent will parade it around to all of the literary publishers and hope that one of them will want to actually buy it. If they do, then you have yourself a book deal. After a few rounds of your agent querying it around, sometimes then you'll start looking into the options of self-publishing, which is crazy because at that point, like I said, you've been working on your book for probably 10 years to then have a real agent that you've been working with for a year say, "I think that maybe we should just self-publish this." As I said earlier, the process of getting your first book deal can take upwards of 10 years or more. And even then, it's not guaranteed that you'll make a penny off of your book sales. The literary marketplace is at an all-time low for profits, and many publishers aren't even offering debut authors advances anymore. It is a kooky and insanely competitive business. With all that being said, self-publishing is looking pretty good. Do you two have any recommendations or words of encouragement for any aspiring authors who might be listening?
I feel like there's sometimes the idea that if you do self-publish versus traditional publishing, that it like doesn't count or it's like not a real publication. And I just don't agree. I think that it's like you said, that's an insane, kooky is a good word, process. And it's not designed to, help the everyday person kind of succeed and like be creative. So I feel like my piece of advice would be, don't let it stop you. If you want to do something like as cheesy as it is, you literally can. And in a short amount of time, a shorter amount of time with a lower cost, because, I'm in college paying tuition and rent, and I don't have, the money to pay an editor or a marketer, someone to market my product. So it's being kind of scrappy, having those resources and doing what we can.
Well, and another benefit is, it can be easier to find someone to represent your work if you do have a history of publication. So if you're someone that's interested in, producing work that is traditionally published at some point, which both of us could have an interest in that in the future, having that history of publication can be really helpful because it's like, oh, these are already successful works of mine, or whatever that may look like for you. So for us, for some people, they can, do it in literary magazines or those kind of competitions where you get put into an anthology like we did. And then also just being able to do it yourself, you get a really good feel of what that process is like. And then also you have something to hold up whatever it is that you're working on next. And we really like the idea of that as well.
Yeah, very cool. Would you mind reading another selection from your book?
Sure. This one is called Admissions of Coconut Cove. Sometimes the half of a shell you find near the grassy edge of the reef is prettier than the whole. Like this, everything I am is more beautiful than it's ever been. Even if I seem broken, because life beats you down like the current, and it takes the ugly out with the tide if you let it. The same way, my mind fills sweetly with dreams as my eyes close and rest on your shoulders, and your rum and coke kiss the salt on my forehead and let all the fear that nearly drowned me fly away in the wind that whips my messy blonde hair into knots and wispy curls. Thanks.
And this is called Red Blend. What do I need more of in life? Sweetness? To sink my canines down into the skin of the cherry on top of it all. I need more of my best friend's belly laughs, the one where she throws her head back and becomes two again, and more smiles that burst through the chaps on my lips. A joyful flood that could only be described as biblical. I need more perfectly made drip coffees with exactly the right splash of cream to feel like his lips are always on mine. To watch the cardinals on my fence shake the rain from their scarlet jackets. The Wilmington rain comes like linen collapsing from the top shelf, swaddling the city in sheets, nursing her with honey and skim. More wine that leaves bubbles in my toes and down-feathered dreams in my head. To feel the maroon dribble from the tip of my chin, to blend with the veins on my neck, and to take it all in with a spoonful of sugar. Thank you.
What are your biggest aspirations for this collection?
Well, I feel like we were discussing this earlier too, and we feel like we've really achieved all of our biggest aspirations for this collection already. I mean, all we really wanted was to be able to get those poems out and share them with the world and kind of like have it off our chest almost. So I feel like we've definitely done that. We've sold over 50 copies, which isn't a ton, but it's more than we ever would have imagined. And we never really had done it to make money. So everything that we really wanted out of it, we've gotten. And just to be able to hold this in our hands and say like, oh, this is ours, we made it, is amazing. So
yeah, I feel like it's nice that it kind of feels like it's like a closed chapter maybe, or like it's not just like a one and done thing. Now we are like, well, we've done it once, like we could do it again if we wanted to, or it kind of gives us another excuse to keep hanging out and spending time with each other and like working on those creative goals together. So it feels like a stepping stone almost.
Yeah. Like we've sealed the deal on our professional partnership here, and we're always going to be accountable for each other in whatever creative endeavors either of us have, whether it be together or on our own.
Yeah.
It's always good to have someone to hold you to your goals and things like that. So.
So what do you think that, if you could look into the crystal ball, what do you think the future of your creative partnership looks like?
We have been toying with the idea of doing another small collaborative project kind of in the wake of In a Field of Flowers, just as kind of like a continuation of, you know, our friendship and the kind of sisterhood that we feel like you can find in a lot of these poems. And
also just growing up. I feel like through this process, we were both just graduating with undergrad, and now we're in a completely different phase of our lives, you know, learning what it's like to kind of go from the girls that we were into women and having adult lives. So we've been really playing around with that idea, I think.
That's very exciting. We have the same last question every time. I wanted to thank you guys so much for being on here. This was a really fun conversation. I think that it will be very valuable to listeners, and also just, if anything, very interesting, because it's so different than our normal episodes. So thank you for coming on. What is the best book that you've read recently?
Well, honestly, it's really funny that you brought up Sarah J. Maas, because Brooke and I are obsessively reading ACOTAR together.
Oh, nice. Yes. Where are you in the series? I love A Court of Thorn and Roses.
Yeah, so
you're done with it.
I finished it, and then I restarted it when Brooke started reading it because I just loved it so much. So I've been listening to the first book, A Court of Thorns and Roses, on audiobook, like every night to go to sleep. And then before I get into bed, I've been reading A Court of Mist and Fury at the same time, because that one's one of my favorites. I like that one and Silver Flames a lot.
I right now am on A Court of Wings and Ruin, and this is my first time reading through the series, so I'm about halfway through that. I recently got an e-reader, and that's accelerated the speed that I've been consuming this series at by a lot, because I also read it right before I go to bed because my Nook is lit up, right? But we've gotten to a point where it's honestly pretty embarrassing how obsessive we are about this, because we both will send each other playlists that's okay, Night in the House of Wind, or You're Training with the Illyrian Warriors. And then we listen to them at the gym, or before I go to bed, I have a galaxy lamp that I turn on when I'm reading it. So I feel like I'm sitting in Valeris while I'm reading it. And I have this ambience that I play, and this candle that Autumn told me smells like the House of Wind might smell. It's kind of embarrassing, but it's funny to me.
In terms of best book that I have read lately though, I just recently finished Adam's Rib by Ruth Hirschberger in its entirety, and that is the best book I think I've ever read. It has just completely changed my life and my perspective on everything.
That's cool.
I have been reading Call Us What We Carry by Amanda Gorman recently, and that's a book of poetry as well, and I feel like it's just really been inspiring the work that I've been writing recently. She's a really talented poet, and it really shows through some of those poems. Some of them kind of recount what the COVID experience was like, and I think that's really interesting, the way that she's able to tie that into like the way that people interact with the world as well. But she's very talented, and I've been taking a lot of inspiration from that lately.
That's very cool. I like that I love your answers because I love that they're both, your first answer was fun and your second answer was scholarly. So it's the best of both worlds there. And I completely agree with you in your obsession with Sarah J. Maas. Everyone in the creative world, everyone always says that Star Wars Empire Strikes Back is like the best sequel of all time. And I agreed until I read Court of Mist and Fury. And I was like, no, this is the best sequel of all time.
So good. It's so good. I want to reread it soon.
She took the prize.
Yeah. It is literally the best book. I just love it so much.
I know. It like makes me, after I read the sequel, I was like, I'm actually never rereading the first book ever again.
It's terrible.
Oh, because you hate Tamlin so much. You're like, I can't go back and read this and love Tamlin anymore because he's the worst.
Honestly, if anything, like listening to it as like the audiobook, I'm like, man, all of the flags were so red.
Oh yeah.
We just ignored them.
He's just like a toxic gym frat bro. You're like, I know, it's funny because you get to watch Feyre have her first love and then realize that the first love isn't always the best love for your life. You're like, I'm glad we've broken up with Tamlin. He was very toxic.
Oh my gosh, yes. And then it like just progressively gets worse. Like I'm into the third book now and I'm like, Jesus Christ.
Forever a Reese's Pieces
girl.
Yes.
I'm a big fan of like the people that are saying that's what we should call like Sarah J. Maas fans or fans of the series.
That's funny. Hey, what's wrong with the Reese's Pieces? Huh?
It's awesome.
I think it's great.
Autumn, Brooke, thank you so much for coming on the show. This was really fun.
Thank you so
much for having us. Oh.
Jinx.
Relevate is produced each week by Audacious Media and the University of North Carolina, Wilmington. Today's episode was hosted, produced, and edited by myself, Daniel Charles Wright, and executive produced by Dr. Megan Sweeney. Special thanks to Randall Library and the excellent people at the Digital Makerspace for lending us their studio. If you have a project, a paper, or a topic that you'd like to discuss on the podcast, and you're a faculty member or a student of an accredited college or university, please send us an email at relevatepod@gmail.com. Thank you for listening. We'll see you next time.